Good morning. My name is Dr. Jennifer Lee Disney, and I'm honored to be in the beautiful home of Peggy Kenny on July 14th, 2015. Thank you so much, Peggy, for inviting us into your beautiful home today.
It's a pleasure for me.
Thank you.
It truly is.
Would you start by telling us a little bit about when and where you were born and raised?
I was born in this county, Marlboro, in this section of the state, which is the PD, 1940. Actually, in my grandfather's home, he was a medical doctor, was really a horse and buggy doctor, although we did have automobiles when I was born. But I grew up on a farm, my father's family farm, in this county. And when I was, I attended school, public school in Chirac, which is Chesterfield County, on the other side of the PD Road. And when I was 15, I went off to private school to St. Mary's School and Junior College in Raleigh, North Carolina. Went there for 2 years of high school and the first 2 years of college. After that, I attended the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, which was woman's college of the University of North Carolina at that particular time. It was also my mother's alma mater. And I got a degree in English, and English and history, double major. Went to work in Atlanta after what was sort of a traditional schoolgirl tour of Europe with a tour group. And this was before young women backpacked in Europe, so we rode a bus, all 30-some odd of us. Excuse me. But I worked for a publishing company in Atlanta. We put out magazines for industry, principally. And I was living down there then when I met my husband, who was also from this county that I had grown up in, but he lived in Bennettsville, and I was more closely associated with the other end of the county, so we didn't know each other in growing up years, but we began dating and married in 1964, and I came to Bennettsville to live, and I've been here for 51 plus years now.
Wow. When and where did your husband meet? You and your husband meet?
At an apartment in Atlanta. A friend of ours, a mutual friend, she was a school friend and childhood friend of mine, whom he was dating a little bit at the time. And he and a buddy were on their way back to South Carolina from the Seattle World's Fair.
Wow, so you both are from the same county and you met in Atlanta.
Right.
Wow.
And
So,
I had been associated with newspapers in high school and in college, so it was even more coincidental that he was editor of a little town newspaper.
wow.
So,
Is there anything else you want to share about your early childhood experience or your family growing up?
it was a fun growing up experience. I was sort of a tomboy. My sister and I were the only two children in the family, and I always thought my daddy needed a son, and I tried to be that boy. I would dress up like a little cowgirl, well, cowboy actually, and when I didn't have a horse or a pony, I had a billy goat that I would ride, and that was always an interesting experience. And the goat's name was Billy, and he had a wife named Nanny. I mean, real original. But those are fun things for a little girl.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That sounds great. You talked about your education. You talked about your first job in a publishing company in Atlanta. Talk a little bit about what were your dreams, goals, and aspirations when you were a young woman at UNCG, when you went off to Atlanta to get your first job. What do you remember about your dreams, your goals, your aspirations at that time in your life?
Well, I really had spent a lot of time with in high school and in college with the college newspapers, and I aspired to be a newspaper woman, and in fact I even interviewed and was offered a night job, which I thought that's not going to work out too well, at the Atlanta Journal and Constitution.
Wow.
But I thought, I don't know that I'm going to be too well suited for covering a beat in the middle of the night. So about that time, I met Bill, my husband, and that ended that.
So tell us about how things changed when you met and married your husband, and maybe the early years of your marriage.
In a lot of ways, they didn't. My hopes and dreams didn't change a lot because I was still involved with a newspaper, and I assisted him a little bit. And then after we'd been married for a couple of years, I had the first of our two children, and spent a lot more time as a mother and homemaker than I did as a journalist. But it was a nice combination, and I have always enjoyed that association with the public through the printed media, and so pleased now that our daughter and her husband are in the family business, which my husband's parents had started.
Wow.
So now we're in the third generation, and hopefully it'll be more than that.
Wow, that's great. So you've already mentioned journalism, publishing. One of my questions is to ask you what activities you were involved in, both before and after your marriage, in terms of, you've already mentioned education, employment, family, community. Is there anything else you want to share about the activities that you've been involved in?
I never have really been too involved with sports. As far as things that I enjoyed, I did the usual sort of things that a young wife and a young mother did 50 years ago. Played bridge, went to little parties, and the social scene in a little town. And I've enjoyed some statewide associations, such as the Mother of the Year Committee. I've served on the State Museum Foundation Board. I'm a member of the Colonial Dames of America, and have been active with that organization. But that sort of thing.
That's wonderful. So tell us about the birth of your children.
Well, Elizabeth, our oldest, was born in '67, and 2 years later, our son was born in '69. He died at age 20. He was killed in a sort of a freak automobile accident when he was working at the beach for the summer. He was a student at Wofford College. And we have 3 grandchildren. Of course, our son was not married, or he was young. But we have 3 grandchildren, and they are aged 21, 18, and 13, and have grown up right here in town, and that has been my real focus for the last 21 years. So
Wow.
I feel very fortunate that we have been allowed to, that Bill and I have been allowed to be part of their lives as they have grown.
That's wonderful. Are those portraits of your children?
They are.
In the house? They're beautiful. I'm so sorry about the loss of your son. I can't imagine how that. You're such an amazing woman and mother to have been able to survive and triumph that after that kind of experience.
Well, it's of course it's something that no mother ever thinks that they will have to face, and but there've been some remarkable beautiful things that have happened in our lives because of that loss. That wouldn't have occurred, and insights and things like that into life and into the lives of other people that have happened because light died.
Would you like to share any of those, any advice to, if there are other mothers out there who may be going through a similar type of trauma or tragedy? What advice would you share?
We had a wonderful minister friend. We're members of the United Methodist Church, who was serving our home church here at the time Light died. And one thing that he told me, and this was in the early weeks, months of that deep grief, was, Peggy, don't navel gaze. Which I thought, what is he talking about? But I finally came to realize that rather than focusing on my own grief and my immediate family's grief, that I needed to focus on other people who have things happening in their lives that grieve them, concern them, worry them, and get outside of myself, don't navel gaze.
Wow.
That was wonderful advice from him, and something that I treasure.
Wow, that's beautiful advice. This is a question I've asked to all the mothers. I just feel like it's particularly poignant for a mother who's experienced what you've experienced with the loss of a child. What does motherhood mean to you?
The opportunity to help mold a little life, and then as that child grows and matures, to see the fruit of your work, your endeavor. And I grieve so for other people who maybe just don't have the same good luck that I have had. Our daughter is a wonderful young woman, and a young mother, and a career woman. And our son was a very outgoing, delightful young fellow. But there are those who haven't had such good luck. Not necessarily because of parental guidance or lack of guidance, but just sometimes it's sort of the luck of the draw in a sense. Mm-hmm. And it worries me for them, because I sense so often that a parent feels that it's so futile.
You talked about you were a young mother yourself and working, doing journalism and publishing. Your daughter's a young mother, balancing being a mother, being a career woman. How were you able to balance working outside the home, being a mother inside the home, being involved in community activities and volunteerism? And how do you think young women today are able to balance that? Talk a little bit about your own experience balancing all the different work that women do inside and outside the home and mothering, and then maybe reflect on young women today, how you think they do it.
I think it's a lot more difficult this day and time. In the first place, I think more young women, and maybe not so young, I mean throughout their their lives really, are called to work, to have an occupation. Sometimes out of necessity, I mean, in order to be able to provide well for their family. That puts a tremendous responsibility on a household and a family, I think. It was easier for me because I didn't have the necessity, I suppose, of bringing in an extra income. My husband has been a wonderful provider, excuse me. And at the same time, the young women today who do work either feel that they must work in order to provide things for their family, and so often they're single mothers too. But some of them, they just feel that they may be driven to work, that their real life's calling is outside the home rather than inside the home. And I've never really felt that way. I've felt that my first duty, and it has been my first love, was my family.
Beautiful. Given that, I mean, that you've had this, your first duty to home and family and mothering, do you remember how and when you first got involved in the South Carolina Mothers Association and Mother of the Year Selection Committee?
I do. Wonderful lady, wonderful friend whom I've come to love and enjoy even more so. Our former First Lady, Ann Edwards, called me one day. We had been associated in another organization a little, and called me and asked me if I would be interested in submitting my resume, such as it was, to the committee, and would I like to serve. And I really had no knowledge of the Mother of the Year program in the state, except that I knew and had greatly admired the lady who was responsible for starting the program in the state of South Carolina back in the 40s, the early 40s. But Ann Edwards, who has a wonderful way of convincing anybody to do anything she thinks they ought to do.
She does.
And so I was accepted to the committee, and have just thoroughly enjoyed serving with these wonderful ladies and helping select even more wonderful ladies in most instances, certainly, to be Mothers of the Year.
It certainly seems like an amazing group of women on the selection committee and women who have been chosen as Mothers of the Year. Talk a little bit about your service, your years of service. I know you have been to teas in the governor's mansion and that kind of thing. Just talk about what it was like to serve with these amazing women, to kind of read the applications and make selections of Mothers of the Year and the recognition ceremonies at the governor's mansion, that kind of thing.
South Carolina, I think, has had a unique history in among the states that have had this program. We have honored our very special ladies, our Mothers of the Year, in what I think is a beautiful way. The day that they are particularly honored is around, usually, well, we don't do it now anymore, but it had been around Mother's Day, and it would begin with a luncheon at a private club in Columbia with our committee and former Mothers of the Year and the immediate family, or usually just the spouse or what have you, of the current Mother of the Year. And the Mother of the Year and some of our committee members would then go to the State House, to the governor's office, and the governor would recognize the mother with a pin, present a pin and a plaque, and there was a photo op, and usually the media were there, and it was just a big day. And after that, would go to the governor's mansion, where the governor's wife and the governor would receive her and her family and friends for a tea. The governor's mansion would help us put on the tea, but our committee, with funds that we had raised one way or the other, would provide for the refreshments for this lovely tea in a lovely mansion. So that made it for a very special day, and that the mother would serve for a year. They were always notified, and that was when I was chairman of the committee. It was a real treat to call the mother that we had selected on New Year's Day, and finally be able to reach them by telephone and tell them that they had been selected and would they serve, which was just a real fun thing. And most of them were just almost overwhelmed that they had been selected, and to reassure them that it wasn't going to be so hard.
Did all the mothers necessarily know they were nominated? Or did they get informed when they were nominated, or were some of them surprised?
I'm sure that they all knew, at least the ones that in recent years, because there was in their nomination form that had to be filled out, that asked for comments and personal comments from them. I don't know really what the process was like back in the 40s and 50s. It may have been a little different, and it could have been that it was more of a surprise. We always had, our committee had several nominations to consider, and we would pick one. Of course, they didn't know, that they were going to be the one selected. And sometimes if they weren't selected for a particular year, then that nomination was held until the next year or the next year. And so they may have thought, well, I will never get it, and then they did,
That's great. And so they had application materials to submit to the committee, and then if they were selected, they had additional application materials to submit to the national selection
right,
process.
it's like
Is that
an
right?
expanded form,
Right.
basically.
What impact did your service or your membership on this committee have on you, have on your family, have on your community? How do you speak to or measure the impact?
Personally, the association that I've had with the ladies that I've served with has just been absolutely delightful. We have formed very close, almost family connections, and care about each other's ups and downs and what we're doing and that sort of thing. There never have been very many of us. I think maybe there are 12 currently, but somewhere between 10 and 15 at any given time. I think that is one of the real pluses to me, that I've had this wonderful close friendship with these ladies on the committee. And I truly think that selecting a mother from a community in South Carolina has impacted that community. They all seem, each little town or big city, all seem to be so supportive of that woman and so delighted that she has been selected almost to represent them. And that's been fun to watch.
It's been such an amazing history and so instructive for me to learn about all the amazing women and mothers who have served on the committee, who have served as Mothers of the Year. I want to take the time and ask you a few just broader questions about society, about women, given your experiences as an amazing woman and mother in your own right. What do you think are the most important issues facing women today?
The pressures of the outside world. I think, as in any family, the dynamics, I suppose, of a family, there are pressures, and there are things that pull and push for and against a woman. But we are so involved in the world around us now that women can't be isolated. Mothers can't be isolated. Their families can't be isolated. And to be able to reconcile those things and make it work is just a difficult thing to achieve with success.
And I'm thinking, you mentioned outside pressures. You mentioned earlier that one of those pressures can be an economic necessity to have to work outside the home and then have to engage in that kind of balance between work and family. And that is difficult. It was difficult in your time, and I think it's difficult today. I think you said earlier you think it's even more difficult today for women to balance
I do, I think so.
work inside and outside the home. What does feminism mean to you? When you hear the word feminism, what does that word mean to you?
Well, we joked a few minutes ago. I don't really know, if you want to know the truth. I mean, I looked it up, and you defined it too, according to Webster. I suppose feminism is the trait of being female in a society that has both males and females. Some have said that that it's reconciling the coexistence of men and women, both in a marriage or in business or in just society in general, and maybe the women achieving equality with men. And I laughed and said, well, we're not equal. Women are superior. Or they should be. I think a successful woman knows how not, and I don't want to use the word manipulate because that's not a very kind thing to say, but a successful woman knows how to manage a situation in what maybe she perceives as a man's world and to achieve success. And it's not by, my way of thinking, it's not by force, because men would they would not respond well to that. So you just got to make them think it was whatever it was their idea.
So when you joking, when you said earlier, we're not equal, we're superior,
Mm-hmm.
what you meant was that idea of women's ability to manage a situation, and
It's what we should try to achieve, not to force things because, well, a man or another woman for that matter, I mean, they're going to resist, and that's going to cause friction in the relationship or whatever it is.
I think you gave some beautiful definitions, reconciling the coexistence between males and females, managing a situation in a man's world, and learning how to be successful, and even making a man think it's his idea when it's really hers, right? I think those are all very important aspects of feminism.
And I must say too that I'm not the world's best at doing that, and that's where I think all women probably struggle, is that we still want to be the boss when we don't need to be the boss. I mean, we can.
Do you think women and men need to learn how to kind of be co-equal bosses, how to share that leadership role?
That might be a good definition.
In the family and the external world, that kind of shared leadership. I mean, one thing this project has helped me think about is how mothers are often the leaders of the family. Like, it's like being the CEO of a business. The women, the mothers, are very typically the leaders of the family and are the bosses often of what's happening. But we're so kind of trained to think of the man or the father as the head of the household, as the leader.
Or maybe once upon a time, the the man was considered more head of the household, but I think as women have found the necessity to supplement the income to a great extent, then that has changed. I think, well, men and women are well, essentially different in their attitude toward things, and being able to reconcile all of that is a challenge, and one that some people meet and face better than others.
Do you think men playing a stronger or larger role as fathers in the family has increased, or has been an important part of this story of women being able to balance work outside the home and work inside the home? Is if men and fathers are also kind of maybe picking up more of that work in the home? Talk a little bit about that experience and your time coming up, and then for your daughter today.
I think probably today, men, husbands, fathers, have more of the responsibility of nurturing in a family, when it maybe traditionally it was women that were considered that or perceive themselves to be those who nurture. Maybe it's changed. In my mind, I keep thinking about some television sitcoms and little books and things like that, when the stereotypes of the father, the husband, the breadwinner, and it was a little different than perhaps it is today,
Right.
that I perceive that it is today.
I think you're right.
And there seem to be so many single parent households, both with fathers and mothers, that maybe didn't exist before. Maybe those marriages as partnerships were miserable situations, and divorce seems to be easier to come by these days.
And that's certainly much harder for a single parent to be able to balance
Uh-huh.
all that work inside and outside the home. I think you're right. I think that's an important changing dynamic in the family. Do you have anything else you want to share with us, or any questions that you'd like to ask us?
Well, one thing that I would like to say, and that is I personally am so appreciative to Winthrop University and your department and you as head for taking the responsibility of preserving and projecting what South Carolina Mothers of the Year has meant to this state. Without that sort of leadership, it would be lost.
Well, I cannot thank you enough. It has been my honor and my pleasure when Martha Cranford and Shirley Fishburne called me and said, we would like to talk to the Director of Women's and Gender Studies. We have a project that we think might be interesting. And the book project came out of that, and the luncheon, and then we had the celebration at the Louise Pettis Archives and announced this oral history project. It's just been an amazing journey, and I have loved traveling across the great state of South Carolina and meeting amazing women like you, learning about what one woman called yesterday Southern feminism. We're having some people defining what Southern feminism is. And I have to say, you told us a really interesting story about the history of this house. I don't know if you're willing to share that story, but those are the kind of things that I'm learning about. You know, we just had a real dramatic experience in Charleston with the way families who lost loved ones were able to share love and forgiveness immediately, you know, the day after. And it was such a model for this country, and I think for human beings, for what the people of Charleston and those families were able and willing to do, kind of speaks to our deepest humanity. And you told us an amazing story about the history of this house that also kind of just touches on our deepest humanity. Would you mind sharing that as we end our interview?
I'll try to do a better job of it than I did a
You
few
did it
moments
beautifully.
ago. The house was built by one of this county's three signers of the South Carolina Ordinance of Secession. And when, during the war between the states, Sherman's army occupied Bennettsville, this town, for a few days. And because it was was learned by the Yankee soldiers that this was the home of a signer, they resolved to burn the house, which they did in many cases with Sherman's march to the sea. They actually set fire to the house and went in the corner under a bedroom, and the Northern General walked through the house to see if there were items that they needed to take with them. I don't ever want to say looting because I don't think it necessarily was. And he saw the Princeton diploma of the owner, the signer of the Ordinance of Secession, on the wall. And he read the name and he said, "Where is this man?" And they said, "He's in the barn." And he said, "Bring him to me." And this is where I get it. They had been roommates at Princeton.
Unbelievable.
The fire was extinguished on the general's orders, and the family was restored to the house. And it still stands because of that.
And the men embraced. You told
They
us
did.
that, right? So this is just an amazing story of supposed enemies in war that were reminded that they were truly friends. They had been roommates at Princeton and were put in this north-south conflict, but embraced, put out the fire. The house stands. It's an amazing, beautiful house. And that story, I'm glad you shared it. It's just a tribute to what the people of Charleston have faced and conquered, to the loss that you have faced and conquered.
Reconciliation.
And reconciliation and love and humanity ultimately triumphs.
That's right.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, your beautiful home, your story.
It's my pleasure. It's not my ancestral home. It's a home that my husband's parents bought in the 1950s, but we've been just blessed to live here for the past 40 years.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing it with us and sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you.